Well, I had a lovely, lovely schedule planned. Then this happened. Hello, I'm Emmet Ryan and welcome to Ball in Europe. And the title of this video is pretty explosive, and that's because what FIBA put out today, pretty innocuously in a press release, could have a huge impact, not just on basketball, but across college sports in the US, but in basketball terms, across the movement of European players to the NCAA system. It's quite big. So in this video, I'm going to outline what the FIBA ruling essentially is stating, or as they would say, clarifying, really. What would happen if the NCAA agrees to it, which is pretty crazy. But what would happen if the NCAA doesn't agree to it, which is escalation. So there's a lot to get into here, as you can probably imagine, and it affects every student athlete in the entire NCAA system, of which there are over 500,000. So, just a few people are affected by this innocuous release. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It really, really does help. Hit that like, share, comment, bells. Do the things, basically, please, and it helps. So now let's get into what FIBA have done. So I'm going to read the FIBA statement here. It's not very long, don't worry, before I explain what it means. But I'm going to give some context here, because FIBA had a very, very lengthy here's all the latest things press release. It discussed its upcoming World Cups, the Olympic Games, under-19 and continental competitions, club competitions, 3x3, its FIBA Plus service, which is apparently helping federations. I should know more about that. And under other matters, at the very bottom of this press release, talk about burying the lead is this. Following the recommendation of the expert group focused on young players and the NCAA created in December 2024, the Central Board has defined 3 objectives to maintain a sustainable ecosystem, focusing on helping players make well-informed decisions, increase availability of NCAA players for their national team, and to help protect clubs' investments into player developments. The decision was made to engage formally the NCAA with the goal of treating moves from players outside the USA to NCAA colleges in the same way as international transfers between FIBA clubs using a letter of clearance. Now, there's a lot of stuff there that sounds like it might be a bit complicated, but here's the key thing. Did you notice I was emphasizing certain parts? FIBA has basically just redefined what it means to be a student athlete. Essentially, this is not just that FIBA is saying it's something different. It's saying a move from a professional team anywhere in the world to the NCAA system is the exact same level of treatment, that's what the letter of clearance is, as a transfer between professional clubs, as in there's contract obligations, all this sort of stuff. Key thing here is it's a transfer of employment. Now, FIBA and the NCAA are going to hopefully, in their view at least, we'll say hopefully that they're hoping, come to sort of arrangement here. But the arrangements available are pretty limited. The term independent contractors, as mentioned by some, is a term the WWE uses. The problem is getting the US State Department to agree to this is another matter entirely, because these players are coming over on student visas. We'll get into more of that in a bit. But the key thing to bear in mind here is that any classification that they have, which is different from a US citizen as a student athlete, which in any way could imply better benefits to that athlete, or really any different type of classification, gives more fuel to anyone moving towards unionization on this stuff. It effectively means that if you're coming to the NCAA from a pro club, you are part of the global athlete workforce and you are continuing your employment at that. That's what essentially this means. And now you might be kind of going, well, is NIL already? NIL is very, very lucrative. That's why these players want to go. Some of the players who are being touted right now and are somewhat expected to go, well, Martin Kalu has already seemingly got a deal with the College of Charleston. He's with Braunschweig this year, I think it was, but he's a FC Bayern Munich player, and he's contracted through to 2027. Mario Saint-Supery, a Malaga player who spent this year with Manresa, the talk is he'll go to Gonzaga. Chema De Lucas reported that. He's still got a deal with Malaga through the next year or two. Nadir Hifi of Paris Basketball, well, he was a standout in EuroLeague this year amongst young players, and him even going was quite a big deal. Now there's a question of, well, how exactly are they going? And Hifi, by the way, is 22. Like, he's not a young guy going over. This is clearly a professional reason he'd be going over. Indeed, in all these cases, the rationale is professional. So the unspoken thing here, what's not been said, but is clearly implied, even if FIBA don't want to imply it, but is very hard legally for any court in the US to argue, they're treating them as employees, and it's up to the NCAA to treat them as such, for there to be compensation in the case of loss of value to the club and all that. So this is somewhat, you might call, the reddest of red lines for the NCAA. So that leads us to naturally asking, what happens if they say, okay? And here's where it impacts athletes beyond European or Asian or African or Australian or New Zealand basketball players, or from anywhere else, just to be clear. I'm sure there might be somebody from Antarctica eventually who's good enough to go to college, although technically no one's a citizen of Antarctica. Fun fact. Every athlete in the NCAA, if they see anything to do with this ruling, including this video, could suddenly start arguing, well, if these student athletes are also employees, why aren't we employees? And as you may be aware, basketball is not the only not for-profit, but the only money-making sport in college sports. Football, as in American football for the non-American viewers here. I'm Irish, by the way, for the American viewers. Nice to meet you. I'm in Dublin. That is the bigger revenue driver, obviously, and suddenly those players would expect certain rights that come with that. Health insurance is the obvious one, workers' comp, all the various things. Basically, they would expect to have the same level of rights, which again, they don't actually have under NIL. Like, they do sign deals for money, but they're not employment contracts as such. They are going through this mirage so the NCAA can maintain the illusion of amateurism, is how you like to put it. And suddenly you're having, well, these are classified as employees according to the governing body. And if you've agreed to pay the compensation or at least fulfill the requirements of that governing body, suddenly these people in the competition aren't student athletes, right? So you're allowing non-student athletes to be in these sports. Therefore, why do we have to be student athletes? And like Dartmouth has got the whole unionization movement amongst its men's basketball program, is probably the best known. But like there's this end that people always think it's the end of the litigation with the NCAA. It's not ending, because really until, and I'm not saying it'll ever actually happen, but until there is full employment treatment of athletes in college sports, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong before anybody gets into me of that, I'm giving you what's going to happen. There's still going to be fights. There's still going to be that movement towards it to get more guaranteed compensation, to get more guaranteed rights. Like, personally, I believe pay the players, but even if you don't agree with that, you've got to accept the reality that the fight's going to continue. Simple as that. That's just where we are. So this is basically saying those players have a huge weapon they can bring to court. And remember, the US Supreme Court, one which never agrees and seems to only ever have certain types of splits, went 9-0 on a decision that eventually led to NIL. These are people who aren't exactly of a mood to suddenly agree with the NCAA. So this would be an enormous, like the third rail, all the other analogies you want to make, this would be hugely detrimental to the NCAA. So it's in its interest, you would think, to say no. To say, this is not what we are going to accept. FIBA, you can say what you want, but if the guy comes here to play college, we're going to ignore your ruling and we're just going to treat it like NIL. For those of you wondering, by the way, because this is a key thing some people don't realize at NIL, a student visa holder, which is what all the Europeans playing college basketball are right now, and also all the other non-Americans playing college basketball are right now, if you haven't got American citizenship, they actually can't make their NIL money within the United States. They have to make it elsewhere. So that's why you see this odd, friendly game played in Canada or played in the Bahamas or stuff in Spain. There'll be an event of some kind held so the player can be paid for that. And that's essentially where the NIL money is going. So because the activity was not in the United States, and that's the thing, they're not being paid to play basketball. They're being paid for their name, image, and likeness rights, which people forget. So even though it is for them to play basketball, it is for them to play football, because they're nominally able to say it's for other things, the NCAA can maintain the presence of the student athlete, the amateur. Whereas, of course, in this case, people will be saying they're workers and you're taking them, and contractual, contracts exist and they must be honored, and there must be compensation when a contract is moved. So yes, it's quite a lot. So you're thinking there's a lot of reasons for the NCAA to say no, and you're right. But if they do say no, what happens? The problems do not go away. So I've got a few notes written down here, so bear with me as I read them off my phone, because a bit later than I planned for this, like I was doing other work today, as you might have gathered. So the obvious one is European clubs might flat out refuse to release players. And you might go, well, if the guy gets in the plane and goes to the college, what's the harm? Well, then suddenly lots of FIBA sanctions come in, which the NCAA, while you might go, well, it's bigger than FIBA, that's true, its sanctions can still annoy the holy heck out of it. Obvious stuff like immediately barring players from international play, limiting access to scouting and the likes, immensely limiting access to scouts really across Europe, and really removing an awful lot of that access to other parts of the world the NCAA has rather grown to like. I mentioned Kalu going to College of Charleston. Like College of Charleston, great school. CJ Fulton from Ireland played a couple of years there. But they've really leaned into that international spirit. And Gonzaga, which is where Saint-Supery is being linked to, is of course also known for that. So a lot of those schools are kind of going, we kind of want to keep those international pipelines open. Like they don't want to annoy people. And you're going to see, a lot of the federations, because one thing FIBA, you might go, well, FIBA, doesn't it want to have the NCAA? Yep, it does. Do you know who it answers to? Its members. And its members are interested in their financial interests. And their financial interests involve their clubs not losing money and their best players being available for their national teams. But also their best players towing the line, so to speak. And they will support those sort of bans. So you're talking about a major escalation, a needless divide, essentially, between basketball in the United States and Europe right now, which, if you aren't aware, is kind of a big deal given the FIBA and the NBA are currently working together to create a project in Europe. But yeah, so it does actually escalate to the case of, do we basically see the tap turned off of Euros going over to America, or at least the best Euros going over to America? Like, this is bigger than basketball. Like I said, this affects every college athlete in the United States, all of them. And I know I'm making some weird faces here, but, FIBA is protecting its interests. You got to remember that. It's not doing this to try and suddenly be the great force of unionization and labor rights in college basketball. But the proposed solutions that are all out there, all the possible workarounds around being a full-time employee, all end with the same problem. Any difference whatsoever in status from an American student athlete, as in a student athlete from the US of A, is going to be treated as a cause to aid the fight against the NCAA. So any classification they do is going to hurt the NCAA's efforts to protect its shield of amateurism. And if that doesn't get you thinking, I don't know what will. I do a lot of videos here. Right now we're in the middle of our big EuroLeague build-up. We'll be doing lots of stuff on international basketball throughout the summer. Thanks very much for you all joining us. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And until next time, I will see you soon.